Not a problem. I actually, I was re-listening to our Fly podcast. I think, that may be one of the best ones we've ever done.
I think so. Yeah, I re-listened. I re-listened to some of it as well when you published it on your channel, and yeah, I think that came out really well.
I was very, very, very proud of it. I think it's a very polysemic text, that one. There's a lot going on. And I think we got quite far. We got quite deep into it, which and I was so pleased that we uncovered stuff that none of us had really thought about before.
Well, yeah, I mean, this usually happens actually when we're talking, but that I sort of I think of things that I haven't thought of before. I often go into these discussions with half-formed ideas, or or in the course of the conversation,
recording in progress,
a new idea will occur to you, or one of you two will say something that I haven't thought of before. It's one of the great. It's one of the things that's most enjoyable about it. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it deepens appreciation for those texts, doesn't it? Like, in an incredible way. I mean, that one, of all of the things I've revisited for these podcasts, that one, The Fly, so much new sprung out at me from this viewing.
I feel the same. We've talked about a lot of things now, and a lot of the time I go in, and the discussion goes more or less how I was expecting, but the fly discussion didn't.
No.
I was surprised, really. The more I think about that film, the more I think that really is a deceptively deep piece of work. Isn't it?
It's superb. I mean, it's so insightful. It's so incredibly smart, and there's so much going on in the gaps. The things that are unsaid in the film, but which are the film seems to be oddly aware of. There seems to be like an implication in those gaps and in those silences, the things left unsaid, which are resonant and profound. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
These details that it puts in, just for the joy of detail, that come to feel like they're freighted, like the wound that he sustains from lying back on the little piece of machinery that you mentioned, things like that, all the way through it.
Seems like, if you look at it in literal terms, it seems to go nowhere. It seems to, like, it's freighted and it's framed as though it's significant, as though that wound is going to be something like but it doesn't really do anything. It's just where the hairs sprout from. But if you look at it symbolically, it precurses what happens at the end.
Yes, and it emphasizes the idea of what happens to him as an infection.
Yes,
as well.
Yes, of course, yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely stunning film. I mean, I've been trawling through my back catalogue of video games because I really want to do one of these George Explains video games. The thing is, a lot of the stuff that I've been back through is so complex. The texts are so complex. I'm going to have to make notes for some of them, without a shadow of a doubt.
I'm very keen to do that because that seems like a lot of fun.
Oh, I think it's going to be great. There's some stuff which I think even if you guys don't play it, I think you'd probably go and watch a long play of it or something. Because they are such beautiful, incredibly intelligent pieces of work. I mean, the one I put up on the chat this afternoon, Scorn, that's inspired by Beksinski and Giger, that is a masterpiece. That is a fucking masterpiece. It's a very ambiguous game because as a game, it's quite frustrating. It's very oblique. It doesn't tell you anything. And you just need to work things out from context clues, which is really difficult because the world is so incredibly alien. It's hard to understand what it wants you to do and to figure, because nothing makes intuitive sense. It's in wholly other context. The designers have worked very, very hard to create a world where they're even talking about the distinctions between anatomy and technology or architecture doesn't mean anything. It's an incorrect binary when applied to this world, and you need to get your head through that. Which is hard. It's difficult for us because we don't operate in that world.
No.
It's aesthetically alone, it's stunning. It's absolutely stunning.
when you shared that link, the image was quite immediately recognizable to me from, well, I mean, as we talked about in the Alien cast, those old Taschen Giga
Yes, of
paperbacks.
course.
It comes up, and I think, oh yes, I see
Well,
the influence.
Well, what Scorn seems to do is it goes even deeper. It takes that notion of the biomechanoid that Alien
Mm,
begins with, and it goes so far with it that you can't operate outside of it when you're playing the game. You need to understand that anatomy is architecture, anatomy is engineering. That's
hmm
the basis of this entire world that it creates, and it makes the puzzle solving and whatnot rather tricky because you need to think of things in biological and mechanical terms at the same time. It's very
mm,
bizarre. A lot of people don't like it. A lot of people really don't like it. They love the aesthetics, but they find the game frustrating. And it is frustrating because it forces you out of this comfort zone and out of the assumptions and contexts that you typically operate under, not only as a video game player, but as an entity that engages with technology and with architecture and with other things in your life. You have to reorient yourself to understand the puzzles, what they're asking of you, and
mm.
it's brilliant. I mean, it is conceptually insanely brilliant. It's a beautiful text, that one.
I'm
I will try and maybe maybe that one would work well as as a starter, as a pilot episode.
sure, yeah. I mean, I just feel like it puts an awful lot of onus on to you to
Oh,
do almost all the preparatory work. That's the
oh, that's
problem with it
fine.
as a format.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, I would like to work up to pathologic. That one is a mountain. That one is it's like it's scraping the cosmos in terms of complexity. That's one
Mm,
of the most sincerely literary texts in video games, pathologic. It's very hard to describe what that is and how it works. Because in order to describe pathologic, you need to describe the entire history of RPGs and first person video games, but you also need to delve into things like Russian folklore and Russian theater and storytelling and all sorts of stuff in order to understand what that game is trying to do. I mean, even describing it as a game doesn't really feel right. It tastes wrong in the mouth. It's the
mm,
anti-game, that one. It's the anti-game. It's taking assumptions of what video games are and it's turning them on their head. And as a result, of course, a lot of people really don't like it. Really don't
mm.
like it because it's a very frustrating experience. It's a despair simulator. It's a despair simulator. Everything
Right.
in it it's against you. It hates you as the player. It absolutely hates you. One of the things it does is there are these economies that you have to work towards. So your character is constantly starving, thirsting, in need of sleep and energy and water. And you need to understand the economies of the game so that you know how to get water and food and where to rest and when to rest and when it's appropriate to rest. And of course, when you sleep, your hunger meter goes up and your thirst meter goes up, so you need to eat. But if you eat certain things, then you may get more thirsty because they're salty, or you may even end up poisoning yourself if it's off or if it's like raw meat or something like that. But the fucking game, it changes its economies on you. There's a point where you'll think, oh, I've got this now. I know who to talk to barter with to get this particular item. So I know how to get, food and I know how to get clean water and whatnot. That's great. And then the game changes the economies on you. So everything you've hoarded and everything you've learned up until that point just goes away. And you need to relearn everything from scratch. And you may be dying of starvation at that point, or you may be infected with something, or you may be dying of exhaustion or thirst. It's wonderful. It's an absolutely stupendous piece of work, but it's a bastard. It hates you. It's designed like that. It's not a mistake. It's not bad game design. It is very very deliberately designed to induce despair.
hmm
And it's very difficult. Oh my god, it's such a hard game. Again, just knowing what you need to do because the gaming world exists whether you're there or not, whether you're engaging with it or not. So characters will just die, and you won't know why. You'll find them dead, and you're like, well, what happened? And of course, an event happened at a particular time, and you just weren't there to witness it or to do what you needed to do to stop it. You will do things on one day, because it's separated into days. It's really interesting. I think it's 12 days you have, and they run in real time. So you've got, your first day is 24 hours, and you've got stuff to do within those 24 hours to set up for stuff to do in the following days. So if you're not there, or you may do something on a particular day that seems like the right thing to do, it's like, oh, well, yeah, this is the moral choice, this is the good choice, this is going to save people. And then you learn a few days later that you've done something absolutely terrible, and hundreds of people are dying because of it, and the people you're meant to save are dying because of it. And it's like, well, fucking brilliant, absolutely fucking brilliant. It's a stupendous game. It really is. I mean, the thing I love most about it is its meta quality. So the game starts and you're in a play. You're a character in a play. But the game starts with the end of the play. And when you step out of the theatre doors, you are in the setting of the play, and the play is occurring within the town that the play is talking about, and you're walking through the ending of that story. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And every time you die, quote unquote, you go back to the theatre and another actor comes and takes over your role. So suddenly your stats and things are all different. Your character is different, and you need to learn how to work with them. It's fucking bonkers. The game is absolutely insane. So what's happening is both real and a story. It's again, drawing distinction between what's fictional and what's not doesn't really make sense in this game. It's both. The answer is which. It's yes. The answer is yes. It's both. And the degree to which you have influence over the story and rewrite it is questionable. It seems that part of the game is that there are all of these different vying authors, and they're never clearly defined in those terms. You just have to sort of infer that from what they say and how they operate. The game also does this absolutely brilliant thing where these weird creatures appear behind the people in the town, the people that you talk to, and they're like these spindly people in leotards and with masks. And as the townspeople talk, these characters speak alongside them. They echo them, but they give you their real thoughts. They give you what they're actually saying or what they're actually thinking. So, you learn that characters are lying to you, or they're not telling the entire truth. It's brilliant. It's a stunner of a game, that one. And I don't know how you would. I mean, there are endings to it, but it doesn't really end.
Yeah, I know. I don't know very much about computer games, but I know that there's been a growth in games where the aim is less to achieve a desired outcome, or even to sort of play a story to a certain conclusion or a certain set of possible conclusions, and more to just explore the world of the game.
Oh, very much so. There's a lot of sort of experiential games out there at the moment where there isn't any real ending per se. You just experience it as is. There's a beautiful game called Journey, which was released about 6 years ago, and that is exactly that. You can even interact with other people in that game. It's not necessarily multiplayer as such, but you can talk to other people who are going through the same journey, and they can sort of give you impressions of what their journey is like. But there isn't any ending to that game per se. You run with it, you experience it, and it's kind of beautiful. It's oddly zen, that game. Whenever I play Journey, I feel very calm. There's no goal. There's no ending point to it. You're not. That's the irony of the title, obviously. There's a journey, but there's no destination, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's absolutely stunning. I think what's happened lately, particularly in recent generations, is that video games, they've stopped trying to emulate films. that's the big thing, right? You know, when video games translated to 3D in the late 1990s, the first thing they did, obviously, is try to emulate film, because that's the legacy media. That's kind of where they draw a lot of their inspiration from. It's from that you get things like Resident Evil, you know, which is just this big mishmash of it's popular horror. You know, it's pulp and popular and B-movie horror. But what's happened lately is people have started to look at the medium itself and how it is different, how it can tell its own stories, and how it's uniquely placed to tell certain kinds of story. One of my favorites, Bloodborne. They're collectively known as the Soulsborne games, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and whatnot. Their storytelling, you cannot tell it in any other medium. It wouldn't work. It just wouldn't work. So much of how everybody gets a different impression of what the story is. Every player has a different idea of what the stories of those games are, because everything is inferred. You have to infer things from environmental details, from cues, from symbols that occur within the game, and you get like a broad outline that's vaguely similar of what the mythology is and what the plot is, but the details can be remarkably different because they're so open to interpretation. And it's amazing. The experience of those games is absolutely amazing. I've never really come across anything quite like it in storytelling terms. Bloodborne in particular is a stunner. We'll definitely have to do an episode on Bloodborne. That's a top 3 game. It's a very Lovecraftian game as well. I mean, it's directly inspired by the mythologies of Lovecraft. So, you know, it's pertinent. It's certainly pertinent.
I think part of why I've never really gotten into computer games is probably because I am psychologically, I'm very oriented towards narrative, towards structured narrative. Even strangely enough, even in I mean, I read a lot of nonfiction as well as a lot of fiction, but the nonfiction I read is very often history, which has it has a narrative. It has it is in some ways, when you write historiography, it's the narrativization of actual events. That's kind of just inherently what you're doing.
Yeah.
And also I read politics and things like that, and that obviously has a narrative. Very often that's about people who want things and what they do to try to get them, and so on. And also, I less so now, but I used to read theory and philosophy, and that in a way also it does, if it's done properly, it does build, from starting points. It's funny, Capital has been compared to a Gothic novel, there's something to that in the way that it builds in an almost narrative way through its various arguments, and so that it's part of, I suppose, why I got on with stuff like that so much, because I always have been very, very narratively minded. I've always been very sort of primarily oriented towards narrative. And a lot of these, it's something about having to be actively involved in causing the events.
Yes.
And then maybe in these other games, these games where really there's not even an objective.
Yeah.
It's just to explore the world for the sake of doing it. It's not something I have any sort of ideological contempt for. I don't hear that and think, far from it. But it's just not. My brain is not wired up to take to that very easily or very naturally. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, I totally get it. They're the kinds of games. I mean, they're generally open world games that do that, where you kind of make your own story. You're placed in the world, and you just go wherever you want. There's a whole series. I mean, there's a whole genre of games that do that. The Fallout games, the post-apocalyptic Fallout games, do exactly that. The primary, there are narratives to them, and there is a running story through those games, but you don't have to engage with it. I mean, in fact, those stories are strongest when you don't, when you just wander out into the wasteland, and that's the sincere joy of them. Because the worlds are vast, they are gigantic, and that sense of wilderness that you get when you step out into the post-apocalyptic sunshine, because you often start in a thing called a vault in the Fallout games. You're like a survivor of the apocalypse, and the vaults are underground. They're like a self-sustaining society, and inevitably something always goes wrong. A mechanism breaks down, or there's some kind of civil war in the vault or something like that, and you end up going outside. You end up going out of the vault, sometimes for the first time in your life, onto the irradiated surface where everything is kind of Mad Max. It's tribes and it's polluted water and it's mutated insects and giant scorpions and robots and all sorts of wacky stuff. But the moment you open that vault door and the sunlight comes through and you see the wilderness expanding in front of you, and you realize you can go anywhere, anything you can see in those games, any direction, you can reach it. And there's stuff going on there. There are little townships. There are other vaults that have been broken open and where weird experiments have been done. And you can read all of the logs of the scientists and whatnot that worked there. There are factories and cities and schools, and you kind of make up the narrative in your head as you go from little scraps that are left. There is something very appealing to me about that. I love those games, but I can't engage with them anymore. They're too big. I just don't have the time or the energy to give to them, because of course they're very interactive. You put so much of yourself into those games to create the feeling of immersion and to get any kind of narrative engagement out of them. It's part of the work is on you. And I kind of like that, but I will lose hours to that. Or hours and hours just wandering around, doing nothing, not following any mission path or anything like that, just wandering and taking it all in. I particularly like that in post-apocalyptic games. I think there's something about empty wilderness and ruin that I find aesthetically very appealing indeed.
Oh, yes. Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Which is kind of pertinent, I mean, really, considering what we're talking about tonight.
Yes.
I mean, we could have segued I could have so easily segued from Bloodborne into this, because as I say, Bloodborne is Lovecraft. It's unashamed, actually. It's completely unashamed. It directly references some of the great old ones and the stuff like that. The mythology of Lovecraft is mentioned a couple of times in Bloodborne.
Right.
Yeah, it's unashamed and unabashed in its influences. I mean, this is a tricky one, isn't it? This is a tricky beast, this. It's one of those weird stories where I appreciate it as an artifact, as in terms of what it meant contextually when it was originally written and published. But do I like it? Do I enjoy it? No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I kind of agree. I have to say it's funny because this is one of the most popular, if not the most popular, with fans and with critics as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. This story is so influential. It is held up. I mean, when people think of Lovecraft, they think of usually 3 or 4 stories, don't they? And Call of Cthulhu, Shadow over Innsmouth, this one, At the Mountains of Madness. This one comes up again, and creators love this, don't they? People who work in like science fiction and horror absolutely love this story. It is massively influential. You'll hear Guillermo del Toro talks about it all the goddamn time, and as does John Carpenter and numerous others. It is so massively influential, and I understand that. I get that. I do understand why it's influential, especially contextually. I mean, what Lovecraft was doing with this story is kind of deliberately going against the grain, especially given where he was generally published, which is the pulp magazines, And the pulp magazines of his era, they published these, pulpy stories, stories which are kind of action-packed and which are about the horror stories that were published in things like Weird Tales. When you go back and look at them, they're all about the horror of confrontation and resolution. It's all kind of immediate. There's often binary good and evil. There's often a monster or an occult or evil force that has to be confronted or dispelled, and either it is or it isn't. The resolution comes either from the evil being defeated or the evil winning out and taking over and whatnot. This is something very, very different. Lovecraft is deliberately going against the grain here. This is not horror of confrontation. In fact, he deliberately, and I think it is deliberate. I don't think it's a mistake. I think a lot of this story is very calculated. It's not about the horror of confrontation and resolution. This is about the horror of continuity. It's about it's what we spoke about in the Shadow Out of Time, which I think is more or less the same story but done well. Thematically, I think The Shadow Out of Time is the same story, but done really, really well and much better and more successfully than here. It's the horror it's that vast, incalculable horror of time, isn't it? Of
time
history,
itself.
that of time itself, right? Here, At the Mountains of Madness, horror and reality are synonymous. You may as well not draw any distinction between them. Here, it is that thing about humanity's complete lack of consequence. Really, it's that notion that things just continue and there's no purpose. There's nothing. There's no design. There's no grand architecture. There's no grand architect. There are species here that have existed much longer than ours and long before ours, and have created civilizations that span the cosmos and may even span different realities, and they're dead, they're gone, they've been destroyed, and they've suffered exactly the same. When it's Dyer, isn't it? He's reading the friezes under the mountains.
Which, just parenthetically, that name, firstly, that's an old family name in Lovecraft's back family.
Right.
Dyer is I can't remember what side it's on, but he had ancestors called Dyer.
Oh, right.
And secondly, Dyer. I mean, he is the central character. He is kind of the representative of humanity in this story, and his name is Dyer, which just seems. I mean, as everybody who listened to the Fly episode knows, I'm shamefully given to puns, but so maybe that's just this. Maybe this is just that. I mean, but it seems to imply that that's just what humans. That's just how you can describe humans. We're just the dyers. That's just what we do. We just die.
Yeah, I think that's it. I don't. This story often gets a lot of stick, and don't get me wrong. I'm going to give it a lot of stick for the language.
We exist.
As well.
We die. That's it.
But yeah, I also think the problems with the language are not mistakes. It's just the way Lovecraft deliberately wrote it. I think everything is very considered here, including the names. And I think that's absolutely it. He's just labeling what human beings are, and it's not. But the thing is, it's not just human beings, is it? It's everything.
It's everything.
It's consciousness. It's absolutely everything. The horror in this story is so vast. It's so beyond comprehension that I think Lovecraft struggles trying to communicate it, and I think we struggle trying to get what he's getting at, because it is so big that it is like trying to climb like a sheer wall of ice. Your mind kind of scrapes against it and you just fall off, you just slip off, because he is talking about cosmic time here. He's talking about archaeological time, but archaeological in a way that human beings can't even conceive of. This is like archaeology that delves into other realities. It delves so deep that it goes beyond our immediate experience. And these entities, these creatures that he draws, the elder things, which they've existed for so long, it's almost impossible to calculate. And their civilization existed a lot longer than ours, a hell of a lot longer than ours ever will. And they're dead. And
it's interplanetary as well,
it's
isn't
interplanetary, yeah. And I think it's even implied that they may be like interdimensional as well, these entities. So
because just off to one side.
Yeah.
The central character in Dreams of the Witch House travels to other dimensions and other planets, and I think it's implied that one of the civilizations he visits mentally in that story is the civilization of the elder things off on some other planet or some other dimension.
Wow. Yeah. But what's really interesting about that is, despite being so incredibly alien and long-lived and so far beyond the ken of humanity, they're actually oddly like us in many, many ways. And you get that when he starts reading the freezes, and it's a bizarre moment. And in terms of storytelling, it's one of the big stumbling blocks of this story, in that there isn't one really. The story occurs at the beginning and it occurs at the end, but this big saggy bit in the middle where he's just reading the freezes, and all he's really doing is giving the reader an account of this mythology that Lovecraft has created. It kind of sags narratively at that point. But what he does describe is a history that, despite its immensity and despite its alienness, is actually really familiar. It's this history of not just one civilization, it's the history of all civilizations, it's the history of all species. The rebellion of the Shoggoths, the slave race that the Elder Things create, that's not marketed here as though it's something unusual. It's not like a great rupture. It's communicated in this really passive way where it's almost like a shrug. It's like, yeah, this is what happens, right? Civilizations reach this point of saturation where everything is overly complex, and suddenly something happens and they dissolve themselves from within. They create their own dissolution. And it's like this shrug. It's like, yeah, this is what happens. This is what happened to them. It's what's going to happen to us. And contextually, of course, this is what's happening in Lovecraft's purview. He outside of the story, he's living in a world that is in this constant state of rupture, where everything is being pushed back. The margins of the known world, the assumptions of history are being pushed back constantly by scientific discovery, by archaeological discovery, by manned flights over the Antarctic. I mean, one of the things he does in this story is that because he seems to be troubled by the fact that frontiers are being pushed back, and that there's nowhere left to explore. There are no more mysteries. So he implants mystery underneath the Antarctic, underneath one of the places on Earth that's most inimical and most mysterious to humanity. He plants mystery there.
Yeah, he would hate today with Google Maps, every part of the planet.
Can you imagine?
Accessible, at the click of a button, a photograph of it from above via
and you
satellite.
can even you can find the videos of explorers who have gone out there to the most inhospitable places on the planet and have just gone there. Sometimes much to their their lament, it has to be said.
But there's a fundamental difference between the psychic world that people have, even a few years ago lived in, and the world we live in, which is that the world to us, the planet to us, feels like it feels more like a house than a forest, because in your own house or home, you can, especially if you've got security cameras or whatever, you can just see every part of it anytime you want. You want to see what's going on in the bathroom, you just go and look in the bathroom. If you want to see what's going on in the back garden, you can open your phone and there's the CCTV camera feed from the back garden. So the world feels like that now. If I wanted to, I could just open up my phone and I could zoom in on any random patch of Antarctica I want to look at.
Yeah.
That's unprecedented in human history. That feeling that the world is just there for us to see. Every part of it is there for us to see. Really, the only part of the world that isn't is the seabed.
Yeah, and just wait. I mean, just wait. That will will be next. That will be done. There's no doubt in my mind that will occur.
But so much of I mean, fantasy writing is inherently based upon this, from the Lost World tales of Conan Doyle and Lovecraft's own writing with all these places, the Plateau of Leng, which it's implied that the plateau they visit in this is the basis of the fabled Plateau of Leng.
Yes,
but it's all based upon the idea of that the world is just not a known place. That your bit of it, but there are vast wastes of space and land and planet and earth that you do not know what's going on there. That was a profound, because it's paradoxically it's an idea that arises with the possibility of getting to those places, isn't it? It's not really a medieval idea, it's a modern idea. As soon as the possibility starts to open up of international travel, the idea of all these places that you could theoretically go to that people haven't gone to,
Mhm.
and what's going on there without
What's
us looking.
happening? Yeah, in
And
those spaces, in those cracks, what
yeah,
is there? What mysteries lie? What could be there that could potentially change the contexts of all of human history and
mm,
understanding?
change our
And
understanding of the nature of the world.
yeah,
That
and
it
of
has this
ourselves,
thing
right? I
happening
mean,
in it. Yeah.
here, what Lovecraft seems to be saying is that it doesn't matter. I mean, what you find, those mysteries, even if you do find some understanding in them, it's desolate. You can find and Dyer does. Dyer and who's the other one? Danforth, isn't it? Danforth.
Yes.
They find an understanding of the nature of human evolution and the origins of humanity and of so much else, like all of life on Earth, really, that is actually really desolate. And because we're kind of accidents, everything is an accident. He comes to the
Jest
conclusion,
or mistake
or
is the
mistake,
phrase from the Necronomicon that he
right?
remembers. He
Yeah,
says that it recalls the line where all life on Earth is created as jest or
yeah,
mistake. So
yeah.
it's either just an accident or it's all a big joke. They
It's all a
just
big
did it for a
joke. Yeah,
laugh. Yeah.
it's so incredibly desolate. I mean, and it doesn't matter if they take this understanding back, which they don't, by the way. They actually sort of try to shield humanity from it. It doesn't matter if they take this understanding back to humanity. It seems to imply the story that it's yeah, it's a revelation about the origins of our species. But so what? So what? You know, all of humanity is going to be dead before long anyway, and the uncaring stars just won't. Nobody, nothing will matter. There'll be no lingering trace of us.
Mm.
Anymore. I mean, maybe there'll be some more left of the Elder Things civilization than ours.
Well, the fact that the entire story is framed as an attempt to stop people going back there as
Mm,
well. It's very insistent upon that. Dyer,
it
the
is.
narrator, says repeatedly that he's telling his story because he wants to stop this other planned expedition.
Yes.
Now, it's, I don't know, I feel like it's implicit in this narrative that that aim will fail.
Yeah.
It
Oh
just
yeah.
seems obvious to me that that aim will fail. There's nothing in this account that is going to stop anybody, that is going to cause anybody to call off
Nope.
an expedition that is in the process of being funded and planned and assembled. Because as Dyer himself actually realizes perfectly well, in his own words, nobody's going to believe any of this.
Well, no, and even if they do, I think it
So
might have the
they
opposite
will
effect.
they will go and
Of
look.
course they will. I mean, like,
So
if I mean, you could look at this in Promethean terms, couldn't you? So, like, if some capitalist or some warmongering asshole is going to want this, they're going to want whatever's underneath. If they half believe that there's the remains of some alien civilization or even some alien creature left underneath the Antarctic, they're going to move heaven and earth to get there and weaponize it, aren't they? Or to make
mm,
money off of it. Of course they are.
that's kind of half implied in a line quite early in the story after they find Lake, I think, is the one who finds the fossil layer,
Mm,
which is stuffed with fossil evidence of life from before the Cambrian explosion,
yeah.
where he says something like we're made scientifically.
Yes.
So there's an
Yeah.
implication of a commercial or a career motive to all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because that's kind of what the elder things have too in their cultivation of life, right? It's always as a commodity or as something to serve them. That's why they create ours. It's why they create the Shoggoths.
Yeah, there's so much there. I mean, it, it the horror does kind of fail to get through, I feel,
Mhm.
and it's because there's a kind of an overload.
Yeah, I
That's
think
how I
that's
feel.
it.
It's like horror overload, and
Yeah.
I feel it's strangely appropriate given the setting.
Yes.
Lovecraft sets it in this absolutely, what's the word? Blizzard ridden white icy snowy
Hmm.
void, and that's there is something kind of, there is a kind of a sensory overload about that kind of weather.
Well, yes, I mean
That
that's a
just
phenomena, isn't it? It's the snowblind thing, and it has been known. Deserts and Arctic wastes have been known to drive people mad. To actually
yes,
give people like a kind of sensory overload, the sense of desolation, the unchanging nature of it.
the sameness and the constant daylight
Mhm.
as well
Of
in certain
course.
times of year.
And that's also, I mean, that's an example of where the story merge. It's the internal landscape expressed in the external as well, isn't it? Because that desolation is it's the existential desolation too, right? It's this again, it's this notion that humanity is just so nothing that all of reality is kind of, if it's not indifferent to humanity, then it's hostile.
Well, just on a quite a crude level, Lovecraft hated the cold. He absolutely
Well,
hated cold
there's
weather.
that too, yeah.
So he's putting this in an environment where he just everything is inimical to him.
Mhm. Yeah.
But yeah, as you say, every layer of this is just horror laid upon horror,
Mhm.
and it does create a kind of a whiteout effect, a kind
It
of a snow
really
blindness
does.
where it doesn't, ironically, it doesn't really come across the way it should.
No, it doesn't.
Um,
He's reaching really high and really deep here. He's trying to communicate to you this sense of existential horror, and he does it through this overload of detail and language, where
mm,
he's piling on and piling on and piling on. The description of the Elder Things is a really great example of this. When they find the fossilized remains of Elder Things, well, the previous expedition does, and you just cannot get a bead on it. I mean, they're great monsters. I mean, they are really interesting, bizarre, strange things. But it's very difficult to get a bead on because of the nature of the language that he uses. And I don't think that's a mistake. I think that's deliberate. I think that's actually what he's trying to do. But as a result of that, I find on a personal level, the horror just doesn't land. It kind of, like you say, it kind of fuses out after a while. And it is like experiencing whiteout, where the details are just scrolling by your eyes and you're losing particularity.
mm. It's a real example of that effect where you go and look at illustrations people have created, and I've never seen a single illustration of the Elder Things based on this story
Hmm.
that I look at and think, yes, that's what's being described.
Right.
Maybe artists will even get all the details right,
Hmm.
or they will do something in their illustration which refers to or defers to a part of every part of the description that you get in the text, and yet the end result is just not it.
It's
It
not
it,
it,
it
is it?
just isn't.
It
Yeah,
doesn't capture
because
the essence of them somehow, and it's a mistake. I
it
mean, it's a
it
mistake,
can't.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of a category error. It can't be visual.
Right.
And I think any actual, really faithful visual translation, if you like, of what's on the page as a description of the Elder Things would just look ridiculous. It would just
Yes,
look silly,
because
which of
they,
course is what every artist trying to do it doesn't want to happen. So
of
they do
course.
something with their skill to get
Uh-huh.
past that. But in the process, they lose faithfulness to
Yes,
what's on the page, because what's on the page is so completely nonsensical
batshit,
that,
absolutely batshit.
yeah, you can't make it into a coherent image.
No, it's not meant to be, is it? As we said, it's an error to try to do so. Lovecraft is
Yeah.
very deliberately trying to create something that cannot be clearly visualized. That's the
Mm.
whole point. It's supposed to defeat our assumptions of anatomy, isn't it? I mean, he describes them as partially vegetable, partially fungoid, partially like deep sea life, starfish openings at the base and at the head, with smaller starfish openings on the tendrils that emerge. It's crazy. I mean,
Mm.
it's one of my favorite elements of the story. I will say, I think the monsters are really good in this story. They're very interesting. But again, there's this passivity to it because of the nature of the rendering. And again, this is not a mistake. I think it's deliberate. I think it's what he was trying to do. If this became just a creature feature, then I think it would be ironically antithetical to the story's project. I think it would be
Yes.
Lovecraft defeating himself.
You never see it up and about moving
No,
around.
no. You
You
see its
see it.
you see its
You see it
effects, don't you?
inert.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see it inert, and then
Hmm.
there's the implication that it came to life and
Yeah.
it investigated Lake's camp and
Yeah.
investigated some human bodies and some
Yes.
dogs and things, and then you see it again, dead, presumably killed by a Shoggoth.
Presumably.
But you never see it itself up and about
No.
moving around, which is one of the huge. I mean, famously, Del Toro was trying to make a movie
Hmm.
of this. It's impossible to think of a movie version of this that wouldn't just violate the point and spirit of the text so much simply by virtue of being a film. It's
By being
impossible to
visual, yeah.
imagine a film that had the budget to realize that kind of monster
Yeah.
visually. That, as I say, just realizing it visually just inherently loses the point because
Hmm.
it's not meant to be visually represented. But also, there's no way they would ever put it in the film and never show it moving.
Right.
They
Of
just
course.
they wouldn't do that.
Yeah. It would
But
have to,
as
wouldn't
you
it? If you were
say,
going to do it, it would have to. But by doing
it's
so, it would be
integral to what
ridiculous.
Lovecraft is doing because it's for him. It's all about the implication, isn't it?
Hmm. That's it. Yeah. It's about the impression, isn't it? It's kind of impressionistic horror. Um, you're meant to sort of attempt to visualize these things and how they move and how they he invites you to do so. I mean, Dyer almost invites you to do so by describing their anatomy. It's like, so how do how do they move? What are the wings for? How do they move over the snow? I think he talks about them moving over land quite fluidly at one point. They move very quickly, but
Mm.
visualizing them as he described them, you're like, how how is
But
that
Dyer is
possible?
he's such an interesting narrator because so much of what he tells us is just his own speculation or
Yeah.
his own, not even speculation. A lot of it doesn't even rise to the level of
Oh,
speculation. A lot
honestly,
of it is just his impression or things he's
yes.
imagined.
In fact, one
So,
of the great failings of the story, I feel, in terms of storytelling, is that very element. Because I think Dyer, as a narrator, he infers way too much, far too much, when he's reading the friezes in the city
mm,
under the mountains, and he's just extrapolating wildly. He's giving you this incredibly detailed history from these friezes that he's apparently interpreting somehow. God knows how he's doing that because they're written by, they're created by an alien race in an alien language that he has no context for, but that's what he's doing. And I think that's where the story often loses me.
yeah, I mean, that's one of the things about the story that I find the most interesting, despite the fact that, as you say, it doesn't really work.
No.
It doesn't really work at all. But it is really interesting that a huge section, an incredibly key
Mm,
section, is just somebody telling you essentially their imaginative interpretation of a work of art.
yes,
That's all that section is. It's just a man
that's
telling you,
exactly
I
that.
looked at a carving and what I take to be a narrative, depictive carving, and I've imagined an
Mhm.
entire history of the rise and fall of an entire people, culture, civilization based upon this
Yes.
work of art that I've looked at. And here it is. Here I'm going to tell you
Hmm.
about it.
It's Dyer telling a
Lovecraft,
story, isn't it? Essentially.
yes. Lovecraft did not have to write it. Again, he didn't have to write it this way.
No.
He chose, for whatever reason, to write it with this radical lack of certainty,
Yeah.
lack of objectivity at its center. And then it's further complicated again by the fact that Dyer is so much an author stand-in to the
Mhm.
point where he gives him, an old family
An
name
old
of
family
his.
name. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and Dyer is familiar with the Necronomicon, and he's
Hmm.
familiar with
Hmm.
Wilmarth and
Yeah.
the Migo, and he's
Yeah.
familiar with so much of it. So it feels like it is Lovecraft speaking to you. So for
Yes.
so much of the story, and so you get this weird Hall of Mirrors effect where the
Hmm.
text is sort of it's presenting this story of the rise and fall of the Elder Things civilization as fact.
Hmm.
And buried within its presentation is a literal narrative setup which makes it impossible to take it that way. And yet at the
Yes.
same time, in a meta way, it is it is clearly Dyer's perspective is clearly privileged,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
particularly since we get the feeling in a sense that he is a kind of author, not just
Hmm.
that he's an authorial voice, but he is the author of the text and he is kind of the author of the story. But how much of the story is actually in the objective material things that he's looking at, and how much is coming out of his
Yeah,
creative imagination? This is some of the most interesting stuff in the story for me.
yeah.
The sort of the meta stuff about essentially about writing stories like this.
It is so fascinating, isn't it? Placing Dyer in the authorial position, because most of the time when stories do that, it gives the character power and agency, right? Ultimate power and agency.
And he has
That's not
absolutely none.
absolutely
Yeah.
right. So he becomes a stand-in for humanity and for humanity's place in this story,
Mm,
and he becomes subject to it. It's a story that's beyond him. It's a story that
mm.
he's simultaneously spinning, and yet is the subject of.
Yes.
That's fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating. And not only that, but it's a very unhappy story. It's the story of his insignificance.
Yes, he's the leader of the expedition, and one of the key events in the expedition is basically Lake, his subordinate,
Mhm.
saying, "Fuck you, I'm not going to do what you tell me. I'm going to do what I want."
Yeah.
But it's, that's a very obvious example of his helplessness. He never really does anything throughout the entire
No,
story, apart
no,
from
Dyer's
walk
completely
around
impotent.
and
I mean,
yeah, he just looks at things and then tells you about them.
the most
That's
active
it.
thing he does is after the story. It's actually him writing the story down and telling you. It's
Yes,
him
yeah.
writing the letter. That's the most active thing that he ever does. It's him walking. In fact, it's him. He's not even like wandering around. He's often just blundering, isn't he? Or running. He's running away from something.
Or just
Um,
seeing things, or seeing, or other people have seen things and they're telling him
yes.
about them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing you get, right? Where he's interpreting what's happening to the previous expedition. So it's a story that was lived by others that he is now interpreting and narrativizing. So you've got several steps of separation going on there. And again, like you said, Lovecraft didn't have to write it like this. And we know that he can do it the other way. We know he can do the immediate horror. We've talked about stories where he does a kind of similar thing, where he's describing civilizations that exist under the ground and which are ancient, inhuman. He does it in The Mound, right?
Mm.
He does it in The Mound. So we know he can do it. Um, Here, he has deliberately chosen to do it in this other way, this slightly passive epistemological way. And the nature of the horror is therefore very, very, very different indeed. It's kind of ontological horror, and the degree of its success is it's questionable. I mean, obviously, it varies from reader to reader. It's very clear from this story's popularity that some people really do respond well to it. Some people really respond to it.
Well,
I
that's an
find
interesting.
I find this one difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I find vast. There are bits of it that are brilliant, absolutely
Yeah.
brilliant. Some
Oh
of the best stuff
yes.
he ever wrote. But there are vast stretches of this that are just. I mean, they're just boring.
Yeah.
They slide. It slides off my brain for
Hmm.
page after page after page. It's a case of sort of you find yourself reading the same sentence over and
Yeah.
over again,
That
or
happens to
you
me
find yourself
constantly with this
doing
one.
that reading without reading thing that happens to you sometimes. You realize you've read several
Hmm.
paragraphs and you just haven't taken it in. It hasn't gone
Yes.
in because it's making no impression on you.
There's a
Um,
strange, almost like hypnotic effect that happens when he's creating those incredibly complex, very sort of stereotypically Lovecraftian sentences where he's describing the architectural details and it's subclauses within subclauses within subclauses, and
mm.
you forget the sentences and descriptions are so long that you forget details and you have to go back. You have to go back and like, I'm not getting this. I'm not quite understanding
Well,
where
and
this character is in space and time now, or like what's actually happening.
it's so characterless and so dry
Mm,
and so
yeah.
unemotional. So much of it.
Yes.
There's not a line of dialogue in this unless you count words in telegrams.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, recounted from radio messages. There's no open speech marks. Da 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 da. He said it's
No,
nothing.
right. There's nothing
There's
immediate, is
barely
there?
there's the thinnest characterization. You get the feeling that Danforth is, young and enthusiastic. You get the
Yes.
feeling that Lake is a bit ambitious and kind of a bit of an asshole. These are very faint implications. Basically,
Yeah.
there's no interpersonal relationships.
Nope.
There's nothing like that. Dyer
Mm.
is almost a non-entity in terms of his personality. He has, he has scientific knowledge and scientific interests, and he knows things, and
Yes.
he's seen Nicholas Roerich paintings and
Ah,
things like that. But in terms of his personality or his feelings about
you
anything, it's
know
almost
nothing.
non-existent.
You know
Or
nothing. And even
it's
when
all in the most
Lovecraft's
general
yes,
adjectival terms. He
this is
talks
it.
about feeling, awe and things like that. But
Yes.
it's so impersonal.
Yeah.
And
This is
it's deeply, deeply uninvolving for long stretches.
it really is. This is one of those stories where critics of Lovecraft, they often say that he tells you to be scared. He tells you to feel this emotion without actually
The,
evoking it.
yeah, yeah.
And I think
I think it's really true in this one.
oh, this is the arch story for that. Where even when he is describing emotion, when things are getting a little bit more immediate, like towards the end, when they're ostensibly, it seems that they're being chased by a Shoggoth,
Mm,
um, he's describing the emotions in these incredibly dry academic terms. This is the emotion I was feeling, and
yeah.
and it doesn't give you any evocation. It doesn't give you any that. Although the moment is actually kind of cool, I like that sequence. I like the notion that this thing is in the darkness because you never really see it, do you? It doesn't give you any description of the Shoggoth itself. I love
Only in
that.
generalities.
Yeah,
Again, you get words like gelatinous
bubbling.
and and again obscene and
Yeah,
things like
yeah.
that. But yeah, it's you get told that it's got lots of eyes popping in and
Mhm.
out of existence, and that it's black, of course,
Yeah. Of course, yeah, it would be, wouldn't it?
but also white. Interestingly,
Mm.
it's also described as white later on,
Mhm, mhm.
white jelly. So
Yes.
yeah. I think with the Shoggoth, part of the point is that it's so completely radically physically indeterminate because
Yes.
it is a shapeshifter. Part of
Of
part of the
course.
whole point of the creature is that it is designed really to, and it is a constructed thing. It's a designed
Mm.
thing. It's a made thing. It's a product.
Yeah.
It's technology essentially.
Yeah, biological technology, right?
Yeah, it is biotech, and
Mm.
it is designed to be a kind of all-purpose tool. It's kind of a
Mm.
gigantic Swiss Army knife, really. That's
Yes.
the idea.
It's what they used
Um,
to create the city, isn't it? It's what they used to dig
yes,
out the tunnels and to sort of create the architecture and whatnot.
yeah. So I think that the shapelessness there is more deliberate.
Yeah.
I mean, the Shoggoth is a huge discussion by itself, but before we
Mm.
get onto that, I think I think this is a real case of the people that are going to like it, like Lovecraft, and the people who are not going to like Lovecraft. There's a tendency for people to start with this one. A lot of people start with
I
this one because
started with
it's
this one.
yeah,
It was a
it's the
mistake.
most
It was a
it's the most
mistake.
famous. And people will, well, I'll give this a go. What's the most
Mm.
famous one? What's the
Yeah.
big one? I'll go straight for that. And
Yeah.
the people that are not going to like Lovecraft, they are going to really hate this.
Because it
Um,
is the arch story, isn't it? For all the things that people razz Lovecraft about, this is the one. It is the one.
all his worst habits
Hmm.
are on display here in
Yeah.
Technicolor,
Yeah.
and so many of his best traits are here too.
Yes, that's the
But
interesting thing, isn't it? And sometimes the worst and the best are the same thing. I mean, as an artifact, given like the platforms on which he was writing and the genres he was writing in, I kind of appreciate what the story is trying to do. It is kind of like an inversion of those grand adventure stories that were so prominent in the pulp magazines. because it has all those elements, but it doesn't have any of the energy. It doesn't have any of the, the pushing back the frontiers, the exploration. It doesn't even have the same style of jeopardy that they do, because the jeopardy in those stories is always immediate. It's always traps or pitfalls or an animal
Yes.
or a creature or something, something, an ancient cult in some forest or jungle or whatever. That's what it is. It's a threat to the self,
Rider
isn't it?
Haggard sort of thing, or
Yeah,
Jules
yeah,
Verne sort of thing. You
exactly.
travel to a jungle and you discover a tribe
Right.
left behind by history, or
Exactly, which is often
yeah,
about the joy of that, isn't it? Even when there's a threat involved, when there's a danger involved, there's always like a verve to those stories. There's an energy to them. It's cool, it's fun, it's interesting. Here,
and
it's
it's
just
always kind of
not.
inherently about conquest as well. It's kind
It
of
is,
inherently about how
absolutely.
the white Western
Yeah.
scientific mind will just
Hmm.
inherently kind of conquer.
Yeah, there's a kind of like up humanity thing about it, isn't there? It's like,
Yeah, with
humanity will
humanity being narrowly defined.
very, very
Yeah,
narrowly defined. Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, often in ironically, pseudo evolutionary terms, which is another theme of
Mm,
this story. But
mm.
here, Lovecraft seems to be deliberately pushing back against that. It's a
No,
case
this is that, but with radical pessimism.
radical. Like it's so pessimistic, isn't it? I mean, it is ultimate nihilism. This story, it's cosmic nihilism. I mean, having learned what they've learned and understood what they've understood, why not just let the Shoggoth eat them or pull their heads off or whatever the hell it does? What's the point? What's the point in carrying on?
Yeah, there's no the Shoggoth might not be planning to do them any harm.
No,
They
might
don't know
not.
that.
I
They
mean,
just react to it with disgust
it is
and
really
terror because
fascinating,
it
actually,
is what
because
it is.
that is one of the things. Another one of the things that this story does, particularly with regards to the elder things. There's a point very far towards the end when Dyer starts humanizing the elder things. He starts
Hmm.
talking about them in terms, they're just a people. They're not monsters. They're just a people. They're
Oh
very
well,
like us in many ways.
he goes further. He says they were men
They were men.
and
Yes,
calls
he says
them
they were
poor
men.
devils.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And he even starts to justify, like when the fossilized one uh, basically dries out and comes back to life, reanimates. It takes apart surgically some of the human beings around it, doesn't it? It actually
Hmm.
dissects them, and he
Hmm.
even sort of justifies that. He says, imagine waking up from a millennia long sleep and you're not quite yourself. You've been in the ice for so long. And the world has changed, and your civilization is gone, and you're surrounded by these weird pink things, and these yapping quadrupedal animals, and you don't really know what's going on.
Hmm.
The entity must have been in incredible fear and confusion at that point. I mean, it's fascinating. It's
It's kind of
so. Sorry, go on.
I, I've heard this adduced as evidence of Lovecraft's changing or softening attitudes on
I'm not
race
so
later
sure.
in life.
I don't think so.
No, I don't agree with that at all. But people
No.
will say, well, Lovecraft was learning. I mean, I have complicated feelings about this because I
Mm.
think hidden inside all of Lovecraft's xenophobia,
Hmm.
there is this xenophilia. We've talked about
Yeah.
this several times before, how
Hmm.
the whole point of talking about these hideous, loathsome alien things from outside that come in and are so disgusting and
Hmm.
so different, and all the xenophobia that's encoded in all these monsters, just every last one, there is a kind of a yearning, a kind of a
Yeah,
love for the
absolutely.
different, the weird, and the alien. But that's on a different register, obviously, to
Hmm.
his conscious ideological racism,
Yeah.
which is definitely part of what's powering these representations of the alien
Yeah.
and the other and the different and the monstrous.
Well,
Um,
absolutely. Let's not forget the elder things are an imperial species.
that's where I'm
You
going.
know.
That's where I'm going because this is ruling class solidarity, isn't
Yeah.
it? He sees them as kindred because they are essentially the masters of a great empire.
That's
it's
right.
a bit. I always remember this bit from John Buchan's The 39 Steps, which is like classic imperial British Empire fiction. Yeah. And it's at the very end when the jolly good chap hero Richard Hannay has foiled the evil German spies. But he says to us, I looked into the man's eyes. He's talking about a German spy that he's captured, and I saw something that I could understand because in his foul way, he was a patriot.
Yeah, right.
That's what it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lovecraft is looking at the elder things and he's seeing something fundamentally similar to what he takes to be the great side of human civilization, which is Anglo-Saxon imperial civilization.
Colonial by its very nature. They're a settler race, you know. They're a race that practices a type of slavery that's far beyond anything humanity can conceive of in many respects.
And again,
he creates their slaves. It's eugenics. It's eugenics, right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
And also, he doesn't extend that apology to the Shoggoth, the slave race.
No.
They're
even
monsters.
though, as I say, Lovecraft chooses to write it this way. He chooses to write the imperial, the great elder things as imperialists, as colonialists, and as specifically as slave owners and slave masters, slave creators, actually. And he chooses to write the Shoggoths as a race of creatures who are enslaved and who gradually come to consciousness of their condition and rebel against their masters. And his consciously, anyway, his solidarity is all with the masters against the rebelling slaves.
Oh, totally, yeah. His sympathies are with the elder things. There is absolutely no ambiguity there whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, if you didn't know that Lovecraft was such a Yankee, he's the yankiest Yankee who ever Yankied, essentially. It'd be very easy to believe that this has been written by, like an ex-Confederate lost causer in Mississippi or somewhere like that. Because that's what it feels like. At times, it feels like a sort of, an elegy to the Confederacy, to the lost South.
And
with the Shoggoths, of course, playing the roles of the black slaves in the fields picking cotton, and then daring to run away and join the Union Army. That's what it feels like.
It does. It feels like a general mourning for the loss of empire, doesn't it? It has that feeling about it. It's almost like, and not any specific empire, but empires in general. It's like this is a post-empire reality now. And all of them come to an end. All of them because of the apparent barbarity of the rebelling slave class, right? I mean, that's the other thing as well, right? He paints the Shoggoths as like really barbaric. I mean, they literally twist the heads off of the elder things to kill them, don't they?
Yeah, they are completely loathsome and barbaric,
loathsome entities.
And yet they are the literal creations of the elder things. So it's difficult once you dig even slightly below the surface. And again, he didn't have to write it this way, but once you dig even slightly below the surface, it's difficult really to see this, whatever his conscious aim was. It's not coherently a story about a great empire that was brought down by a slave race that stepped out of its proper place. It's about an empire that was brought down by its own products, by its own doings, by its own creations,
by inevitability. Right. I think that's the big takeaway. It's inevitability. This is not aberrant. That's what Lovecraft seems to be saying. This is what happens. This is just the nature of not just empires, but civilizations. They reach that point of saturation. They reach that point of overcomplexity, and then they just collapse. Whether it's by a rebellion or whatever, it's almost incidental. It doesn't really matter. Entropy will find its way. It will find a way in, and it will bring everything to dust. And it's interesting. Like if you look at like the eugenics and if you look at the story in imperialist terms and imperialist assumptions, you know what? The Shoggoths are the ones who survive. They're the ones who brought the Empire down, aren't they?
They brought the Empire down. They survived, and they did it by knowing who their enemy was. And
exactly.
millions of years later, when they're both unthawed, or the Shoggoth isn't even unthawed. It's apparently been there
still
this
there.
entire time.
Just been there.
Yeah,
apparently,
it's just been there, just sitting there. So the minute one of the masters turns up again, even though it's millions of years later, the Shoggoths are just like, nope, and just kill it immediately. And I mean, I don't. I'm on the Shoggoth side. Definitely.
It's like if you saw like this oppressor that you thought had been dead and conquered for such a long time, and you saw another one. Well, your first response would be, "No, you're done.
Nope.
I am not going to. I'm not allowing this. You are the enemy, right? You are the enemy. You've demonstrated that you're the enemy consistently. So, fuck you."
Absolutely.
And also, I mean, the Shoggoths they're more widespread. The Shoggoths turn up all over Lovecraft. There's loads of Shoggoths across the world, by all accounts.
Yeah.
There's certainly one in Innsmouth,
Yeah, they won.
In purely, like, if you want to look at it in those pseudo-Darwinian terms that imperialism absolutely fucking loves, the Shoggoths won. So even by their own terms, and assumptions.
I mean, Darwinism is and deep time generally is as you say, it's the basis of the horror here, isn't it? It's the Lovecraft. This is the thing about him. He's not reactionary enough to just refuse to believe in Darwinism.
Oh no.
But he is reactionary enough to take all its possible negative, nihilistic connotations and run with it. That's why I don't think it really makes much sense to talk about Lovecraft as a reactionary, or even a right winger in any sort of coherent ideological sense, as much as a lot of his actual ideas and positions, and even the themes of his stories, are in real terms, they are right wing. They are extremely right wing. Sometimes they're even outright Nazi, as we said
as we discussed last time. Yeah.
In term, he hasn't got a coherent enough, or in fact an optimistic enough worldview to be an actual sort of ideological right winger.
I think you're right, and I think this story really demonstrates that. I think this is the greatest parable of that very fact. He hasn't got any like energy. He hasn't got a vision of what he wants the world to be, or he's not trying to encourage his beliefs to become reality. He doesn't think it's ever going to happen. He's surrendered already. He thinks it's done. He thinks but from his own terms, he thinks it's over. Whatever project,
in the fiction anyway, maybe consciously out in the real world, he didn't feel this way, but in the fiction, he doesn't think there's any hope for it. Auden wrote that there are two types of people, Arcadians and Utopians. Arcadians are the ones who think that paradise is located in the past, and Utopians are the ones who think that paradise is located in the future. And I think you get right and left variants of both, if you know what I mean. Lovecraft doesn't believe in Arcadia. Arcadia is pure horror. And alienage, and it's where you find that the origins of humanity are just in this sort of screaming nihilism, jest or mistake, and it's not going anywhere good either. No. You're not going to be able to build the great rational Anglo-Saxon right-thinking civilization based on. I mean, again, we get in this story this appearance of this idea of authoritarian socialism as the basis for an advanced civilization, by which he seems to mean a kind of an extreme statist collectivism or something. But you're not going to get to that, because or you might get to it for 2 minutes and then it'll fall apart, because that's just what happens. Everything is born in horror, in meaninglessness, and everything ends in chaos and decay.
Yes, that's it. That really is it, I think. And I think this story, of all of his, this is the one where you find that philosophy, if you want to call it that, expressed in, I don't want to say the clearest terms, but certainly the most coherent terms.
Yeah. And that's where I think I think you absolutely can and should see the racism inherent in the idea of the Shoggoth. You should read it as, a kind of a representation of. Well, I mean, to be explicit about it, the coloured people of the earth, the people of colour of the earth, the colonised, the enslaved, and so on.
The enslaved, yeah.
Yeah, you should read it as a racist representation of those people, as kind of just this worm in the apple. Civilization is based upon using them for their labor, and that's right and good and what you should do. The trouble is that civilization is based upon using them for their labor, which means you have to have them, and their presence just contaminates everything and leads inevitably to decline and fall. Yeah. That's the racist vision at the heart of this, and I think you should acknowledge that that is what it is, and that it's there. But I think there is a deep, without excusing that, even in the slightest, I think there is a deeper, I'm not saying a truer, but another layer to this, which is that it's just the pessimism goes so deep that it goes beyond that level of racist cynicism to just this idea that any kind of civilization or society that makes or does anything or builds anything is kind of just doomed to decay and fragmentation simply because it does that, because it makes things.
Because it exists in this reality. It exists in this reality, right? Where entropy is just it's pervasive, it's universal. There's nothing you can do to escape it. You build,
because that's the other thing that the Shoggoth is. It's the product. It's the basic product. And so it is the basic fact that civilizations make things and do things that causes them to be doomed and meaningless.
Absolutely. And that's innate. I mean, that's innate to its nature as well, isn't it? The fact that it lacks any identity at all. It has nothing. It doesn't even have a coherent shape or anatomy.
That's right. It just becomes a kind of an product. It just becomes a kind of a metaphorical representation of production itself, of activity, of doing anything, of making anything, of building anything. And so you end up with a thesis which is essentially, any time you try to make or build or do anything, you are, by doing that, also destroying everything that you make and build and do. In the long run.
Its very nature, just because of time, because of entropy.
Well, and the nature of the process as well. The process is inherently self-destroying.
Wow,
it's inherently self-defeating.
Yeah, jeez.
So that is pessimism at a level that goes beyond reactionary politics, even though it contains reactionary politics.
It contains it, but it is also, it expands, doesn't it? It expands beyond the parameters. And I think, that is what this story is trying to do on almost every level. It's trying to break those parameters. It's trying to react against certain assumptions, even like on a purely literary level. But it doesn't necessarily work. Certainly not for me. I know it's a lot of this is personal. It depends on how you react to the story. But as you say, I find myself, although I appreciate the ideas that it's playing with, I just can't. I cannot react to it on an aesthetic level. I find it very difficult to read and to enjoy.
Yes. Oh yeah, no, this is not. I mean, I think this is only the second time I've ever read this, and I did not enjoy rereading it. I found it a slog. I'm sorry, I found it a slog.
I found it really difficult this time round, and
he really put a lot into this as well. This was this is one of the few pieces of work where he really felt satisfied with the result and felt that he'd really put a lot across.
He really pushed this story as well. I mean, he found it very hard to sell because the pulp fiction magazines of the time did not buy this kind of thing. They did not like this sort of almost like retrograde epistemological fiction. They just didn't like it. They liked it, jumpier, it's more immediate, and
it's much longer than the stuff they usually published, and it's quite. I mean, it's very ostentatiously learned.
Yes,
there's long stretches of it where he's essentially writing a science essay, which he did. He wrote science essays as well,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there are long stretches of this read like it just is a science essay you're reading,
Yes.
and he's showing off. He's showing off how much he knows about biology and archaeology and paleontology and
Yes.
things like that.
I mean, on a thematic level, it does kind of work because he's trying to express that humanity has come to this saturation point with its sciences and with its explorations. We know so much about the world and blah blah blah, but do we really? Do we really? Are we pushing into frontiers we shouldn't be, etc. But he is also showing off, and also it just again, it's one of those elements of the story that's incredibly alienating because it's boring. It's
Yeah,
incredibly boring.
yeah,
The beginning of the story when he's just talking about the provisions that you need for the trip for the expedition. It's
yeah, and the
yeah,
ships that they traveled on,
right.
and yeah, I'm
I,
sorry,
I just yeah,
don't care.
I don't care. Yeah, I
Cut
actually
to the
don't
chase,
care.
Howard.
Yeah, because when he's getting to the descriptions of the peaks and of the weird structures that are on them, and again, he's describing them in terms where you are not meant to be able to clearly picture what they look like. That's kind of
Mm,
cool. I like that. Again, he goes on a
yeah,
little bit too much with it, but I kind of like it. It makes the setting really surreal and strange, and the implications of it are kind of wonderful. The notion that there are these angular constructions in the midst of the Antarctic that are not natural. They're not meant to be there. They suggest civilizations that were there long before humanity and so on and so forth. That's kind of cool. But yeah, it's cushioned, isn't it, by all of this surrounding stuff, which kills the impetus of the story completely.
yeah. It's like he feels like he needs to embed those moments in a longer and wider realist narrative.
Yes.
And that's just, I mean,
It
that's
doesn't
just
work,
not
does
what
it?
he's good at.
No, it isn't. It
You could
really
do
isn't.
that, but in order to make that interesting, it would also have to be about people
And
and characters.
he's not good at people. He never has been good at people. There's one or two stories where you get halfway interesting or engaging characters, but he just doesn't really do that. Characters in his stories are narrators or they're ciphers for story, and that's it. That's
Yeah.
largely it. And these characters you just don't have the investment in. Like Dyer, it's
No,
very hard to invest in.
they're anonymous. They're
Yes.
just anonymous names on a page.
Yep.
They they barely have relationships with each other. It's
Or with themselves, right? There's no like it's really strange for epistemological fiction where there's no internality, there's no sense of who they are as people,
mm,
other than the way they react to the various phenomena that they experience and the environments that they experience. I mean, there are points in this story where, again, it's this weird thing of like, they're only doing this because the story requires them to. You already know there are these entities and that there's this strange stuff going on. Why are you going into the mountain?
yeah, yeah,
You know, what? Why?
yeah,
Just go. Get in the plane and go.
yeah.
uh, I know. There wouldn't be a story without that. But there are things that stretch credibility, aren't there? There are moments that stretch credibility here. And there's oddness as well. The penguins.
Yes, the
What
penguins.
is that?
The
I know
way,
that Lovecraft had a thing. He had like phobias of various different kinds of animals, mostly sea creatures, it seemed. But penguins?
yeah, I feel like some of this goes back to the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, the
Yes, which
Poe
he's
story.
trying. Yeah, he's really trying to embed this story in the same mythology, isn't he? In the same tradition.
Yes. Well, I mean, famously, there's the cry of
Oh, Tekalili.
Tekeleli,
Yeah.
which is he has the big white albino penguins
Mm,
repeating that,
yes.
like the birds in Poe
In Poe,
in the
yeah.
narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym. And then he has the Shoggoth repeating it.
Echo it.
So
Yeah.
and he actually says at one point, Dyer actually says, "Oh, it's like in Poe,"
Yeah.
and I
Right.
think
Yes.
Poe must have had access to secret ancient information or something, which is really, really very cheeky on the part of Lovecraft to sort
it
of
is a little bit
fold
cheeky, and
Poe into the mythology.
it's
So
one of these
Poe,
things he does constantly. Actually, he does it in this story a lot, where he kind of like he cheats. He's like to give you an impression of what he's going for. He like references other things. So he references Nicholas Roerich paintings, and it's like,
yes,
don't do that, Lovecraft. If you describe it, don't just say, "Oh,
yeah,
have you ever seen any of these paintings by Roerich?" Yeah, it's like that. Okay,
yeah,
it's like that.
or my favorite is when he says it's like the paintings of Clark Ashton Smith.
Right,
Like barely anybody had heard.
right.
I'm sorry, with all due respect to Clark Ashton Smith, very interesting writer, very
Yes,
enjoyable to read. He wasn't a big name that
as a painter.
university academics would have
No,
known at that
no.
time. It was people in Lovecraft circle
In
that knew
his
about
circle,
Clark
yeah,
Ashton Smith,
yeah.
and some people who read poetry in
Mm.
California. That was it.
And also, as I say, it's kind of a literary cheat. That is, it's a writer's cheat when you're referencing the work of someone else because you can't quite describe what you want to describe. It's a bit
Yeah.
like this bit in Clark Ashton Smith, or this bit in Poe. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a wider thing going on here as well, particularly with the Poe reference. He's trying to ground this in a very particular tradition, which is the Gothic. Um, and I get that.
Well,
And
and
I kind of like it. I'll be honest. I do kind of like that element.
he's grounding it in the very. I mean, the what he does with Poe, I do think it's quite fun. He sort of
Mhm.
folds Poe into the mythology. So the
Yeah.
idea being that the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym is something written by Poe in this
Mhm.
universe, but Poe puts Tekeleli into that because he sort of puts
Yeah.
that in as a reference to, Poe's read the Necronomicon, apparently.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that's the implication, or something like that is the implication. But yeah,
It does kind of
outside of
work
the
because of the
story,
way Gordon Pym ends, right? Where it's just stops. It just
yeah. Well,
stops.
he puts Poe into another story, which is the Shunned House,
Yes.
where Poe is he knows the house, which
Hmm.
becomes the focus of the story. Like, yeah, Arthur Gordon Pym is an example of this really weird thing where American stories of sea adventure
Hmm.
start they include this weird sort of visionary quality about them. I
Yeah.
mean, Moby Dick is the other obvious
Of
example,
course.
and
Of
it
course.
centers on the color white.
Hmm.
There's the famous, I mean, Moby Dick is stuffed with references to whiteness. It's one of the major motifs of the book, and you have the famous white chapter of Moby Dick.
Of course.
Whiteness is a huge deal in Arthur Gordon Pym as well.
Hmm.
To the point where, as you say, it stops after as it goes along. That book gets more and more crazy,
Yeah.
and it ends with just the appearance of this gigantic, shimmering white human apparition.
Yep. And then it
And
ends.
whiteness is a huge deal in this story as well. It's not just the snow, the snowy environment.
Hmm.
There are loads of references to whiteness in this, including very particularly the huge albino
The
penguins,
albino
which repeat
penguins.
the
Yeah.
motif from Poe.
Hmm.
And it's tying this story in very definitely with this very odd little byway of American adventure fiction, which
Yes.
is focused on seafaring voyages which get progressively more and more mystical and
Mm.
hallucinatory as they go on. That's the
Yeah.
tradition. He's consciously writing this story in that tradition, in the tradition of Poe and Melville.
And once again, it's fascinating because those stories, they tend to once again have this incredible energy to them, and even a degree of weird hallucinatory hopefulness. But this doesn't.
Hmm.
This is the antithesis of that.
They do share the racism.
They absolutely share the racism. Yeah, they
Arthur
do.
Gordon Pym is
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's
probably
well, Poe. He's one
Poe.
of the
Yeah,
great bastions
yeah.
of
Poe
pro-slavery sentiment, wasn't he?
Poe was a Southern gentleman.
Mm,
He saw no problem with slavery.
not at
He
all.
was a white supremacist. He just
Yes, he
was.
was.
Sorry,
Yeah, yeah,
that's
he
the
was.
truth.
Yeah, absolutely, he was. Yeah. Um, and it kind of makes sense that Lovecraft would revere him in that regard.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
There's
as I say, this
go
was
on.
my first. This was my first Lovecraft,
Mm,
and that was a mistake. It was a huge mistake. I didn't even finish it when I first came to it.
really?
Yeah, it was a real disappointment as well because I was very excited. I was very excited having heard of this man, referenced by lots of people that I really respect and like, and to understand that his fiction was so influential. I mean, King described him in one of his essays as the 20th century's dark and baroque prince, or something to that effect. Um,
Mm.
and obviously, I'd encountered Lovecraftian fiction. You can't help it, can you? You if you engage with fiction at all,
Oh,
particularly
when
genre
I
fiction.
when I started reading Lovecraft, I realized suddenly that so many things I already knew
Hmm.
were influenced by him.
Oh God, yeah.
Um,
One of the very
a bit similar
first.
to Nigel Neal, actually, as well.
Yes, of course. I mean, one of the very first like adult horror stories I ever read as a kid was The Mist, was Stephen King's The Mist, and that's a
Hmm.
just a giant love letter
Mm.
to Lovecraft. So you can imagine I was really very, very excited to read it, and I was trying. I found myself. I found I was forcing myself to get through it. I was just, slogging myself, just
Hmm.
flagellating. Can't get through it, get through it. And I was
Yeah.
trying. I was doing that thing where, when does it get good? When does it? When does something happen? And don't get me wrong, I was probably maybe too young, and maybe I didn't really understand the context to appreciate it on any particular level at that point. But I did stop reading it. It took a long time before I went back to Lovecraft directly, and I went back through a different story. I think it was the music of Eric Zahn, actually, which is a good one. That's a good one to start with.
It's probably his first really great story, I
Hmm.
think, Eric Zahn.
I love that one.
It's surprisingly early, Eric Zahn. And
Is it?
yeah,
Oh, I didn't know that because it doesn't scan as an early Lovecraft.
it doesn't know. It feels like later developed work, but it's earlier than you think.
Yeah,
It
and I
might be, yeah,
yeah,
it might be his first really, really, truly great story.
and I did go back to the Mountains of Madness, and I enjoyed it more the second time round, but I still don't think it's particularly his most successful story. And having read it again this time round, I'm not sure I'll read it again.
I don't imagine I'll go back to it. I think twice is plenty for a lifetime.
It's probably
It
enough,
was
isn't it?
it was quite nearly the first one I read because I
Right.
picked up I picked up a sort of an anthology,
Hmm.
and I'd heard of it. And I
Yeah.
remember I did that thing where I thought, well, I'll save the best for last, even though it was the
Right.
first in the book. It was At the Mountains of Madness and
Hmm.
Other Stories or
That's what
something
I
like
picked
that.
up. Was it with the one
Yeah.
that had the weird gangrel creature with the one eye on the front?
No, mine was a hardback, and it didn't have its dust jacket,
Hmm.
so I couldn't tell you what the original
Right.
cover was like. But it was somebody else's copy, and it was
Hmm.
just a hardback without a dust jacket. But yeah, it was the first in the book, and I'd heard of it, and
Hmm.
I thought, well, okay, I'll save the best for last, and I'll start with the second story in it. And the second story in it was Charles Dexter Ward,
Oh, so one of the
which
best.
is
One of the best.
it's still one of my favorites, and
Yeah.
I still think it's one of his best, certainly one of his best longer pieces of work.
Yeah, I love that story.
Yeah, and then there was some, if I remember rightly, there was some short Randolph Carter
Hmm.
books, or stories rather. I think the Statement of Randolph Carter and The Unnameable and some things like that. And then it got into, and then there was one of the Dream Cycle stories in it as well, which I didn't like at all. So
Yeah.
I quit that, and I thought, okay, well, I'll start with the first one, and that's
Yeah,
when I
yeah.
read Mountains of Madness for the first time. And but luckily, I'd already been, I'd already read some good stuff by the
Yeah,
time
yeah. So
I
you
went
you
back to
didn't
the
sort
start
of
of the
like
book.
abandon Lovecraft as a
No,
result.
no. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's a tricky one, and the fact that so many people have tried or have expressed a desire to see this in film terms,
I don't know how you film this. I
I
mean, as we've
don't
said,
know. I don't know how you
John
make this
Carpenter's
work.
done the only thing you can do, which
Yeah,
is kind of they dig up a Shoggoth and it
yeah.
kills them all.
He removes the mythology. Interestingly,
Yeah.
he completely removes all the mythology from it and leaves this great whacking mystery in its place, and it actually really works because it's
But there is something really interesting about all this, which is that, as I said, people read this. Some people are obviously they're going to read this and they're going to think, well, this is bad. This is
hmm
bad. I don't
hmm
like this, and they're going to give up, or they're going to have a very snooty opinion when they
yeah,
write about it as critics or something.
yeah.
And other people really do get entranced by this
Oh
one.
my God, I've seen essays on this, like, online and whatnot, that are just effervescent with praise. They love
Yeah,
this story, and I
yeah.
get it. I get it in a sort of abstract sense. I get it contextually. I understand what he's trying to do and the ideas that he's playing with, and I understand that they're kind of revolutionary in horror for the era. But even given that context, I just find the mechanics of it, just the brute nature of the writing, just alienating. It
Well,
doesn't do it.
this is what I wonder. I wonder if there isn't something about the way it's written. It might be the same qualities that make you and I criticize the story
hmm
that really appeal to other people. The that what we characterize as dryness of
hmm
writing, characterlessness, plotlessness.
Yeah.
Other people might really appreciate those qualities and characterize them in different ways.
I
There
think
might be
so.
something about this that really appeals to a certain kind of reader. Well, clearly there is. Clearly there just is.
Clearly.
Something about the withholding language,
Yeah.
the language that withholds emotion.
Yes, as I say, I don't think anything in this story is a mistake. I really don't. I think this is probably his most crafted story.
Yeah,
I think it's very
yeah.
deliberate, and I think all of the run-on sentences and the adjectives on adjectives on adjectives, I think it's all deliberate. I don't think there's a word in this story that hasn't been picked and pored over and very, very deliberately placed. And I think all of the things that we, ostensibly are complaining about are essential to it. I think they're absolutely essential to making it work on a thematic level. It just doesn't for me.
Its nature as a description of a vast fictional history.
Mhm.
That does feel like it resonates with a certain kind of reader and
Yeah.
viewer. There do seem to be a lot of people who are invested in speculative or fiction or fantasy fiction for what you could call alternate or fictional histories,
hmm
or alternate or fictional sociologies, or
Yes.
alternate or fictional economies. People who get very hung up on things like the continuity and the details and the lore in
Yes.
fantasy stories and science fiction. I'm trying to be polite about this because it's
Yeah.
very easy to talk about this in ways that sound pretty scathing. And
Giving
I'm
the
not
internet, yes.
completely, yeah, I'm not completely innocent of this either.
No, not at all.
I've indulged.
I'll be honest. I love some of those lore videos and extrapolations on things that I like, on things that I love.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I don't think it's any coincidence that Lovecraft, a lot of people come to him via RPGs,
no.
is it?
Oh my God, the influence. I mean, that's another thing, right? The influence of this story on other media, on video games, is
Oh, it's
freaking
not just influence; it's
huge.
mimetic.
Yeah,
The
it
influence of this.
absolutely is. It absolutely is. The references you will find in oh my God, it would take forever to list the various franchises that play with this material, and often it's very subtle. It's very sublimated, but my God, is it there?
Well, just in terms of the influence in other fiction of this type, I
hmm
said I'd when I read Lovecraft, I recognized his influence in other things that I already knew. One of
Yeah,
the big ones is, as you know, I was a very big Doctor Who fan from
right.
from early childhood. When I read At the Mountains of Madness, I was
hmm
quite young, and I recognized in it very directly that it was a huge influence on two classic Doctor Who stories from the 1970s, which, of course, at that point, they hadn't even been released on BBC VHS
Wow.
home
So,
release. I knew them from their little novelizations
yeah.
because most of the old Doctor Who's were turned into little novelizations, and that's how I knew these stories, because they'd both been broadcast before I was born. One is The Seeds of Doom, which is a story which starts at the Antarctic, and some explorers, or they're manning an Antarctic base, they dig up a strange vegetable pod, and it turns out to be the seed of there's two of them actually. It turns out to be the seed of this alien life form called the crinoid. The word crinoid is a scientific term which is used in At the Mountains of Madness to refer to some of the specimens they find, fossilized specimens. And the crinoid is kind of this sentient vegetable creature that if it's fed, and it feeds on human beings, you feed it human beings, and it in the course of the story it infects a human being and takes him over slowly, and he turns into this gigantic tentacular monster. It's all tendrils and mouths and things all over it. It's very, very Lovecraft. Very Lovecraft.
Very The Thing, yeah?
Yeah, very The Thing as well. And in some ways, a bit The Fly. It's funny, talking about The Fly last time, it reminded me that there are actually several stories, particularly in the 70s, which are about people being infected by alien life forms and turning into them.
Something clearly in the air, right?
Yeah, the other story is an earlier story called Colony in Space, which is a very interesting story politically, but I won't go into details about it. But one of the things about it is that there's a scene where the Doctor and his companion end up underground, and they deduce the history of an alien civilization from essentially a wall painting.
Right. Okay.
Now, I think both of those are drawing directly on this story, and this story is, I mean, the X-Files do an episode which is clearly influenced by The Thing, which is clearly influenced by Lovecraft.
By this, yeah.
Star Trek did an episode where they dig up some frozen Borg, and they're at the Antarctic. This thing about explorers digging up frozen examples of ancient or alien beings in the Antarctic, that is... it's almost a subgenre at this point. It
really is, isn't it? It's almost like a stock story for sci-fi or horror shows. It's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And it all sort of derives from here, doesn't it? I mean, that's the other thing about the story that is difficult to grasp. Like, contextually, it's new, isn't it? At the time, it's new. There really isn't anything quite like this out there, despite what it's riffing on and what it's sort of very dryly parodying. There's not much like it. It's a unique artifact.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have to give it that. It's doing something quite new.
And I think it's trying to as well. Again, it's not an accident. It's not, it's not something he's just taking a chance on. I think he was aware of what he was doing with this one.
And of course, things that don't have an influence, things that are different, that don't go on to have an influence, we don't think of them as new. We think of them as sort of one-offs or failed experiments. They only become examples of somebody doing something new when they become somebody doing it for the first time, when it catches on and other people copy it.
That's it. And when it becomes influential, when it becomes a meme, ultimately.
Yeah, like a lot of things with Lovecraft, there was a big gap where it kind of lay fallow, and then it started to encroach upon the culture via a few creators who were in the know.
Yeah, I mean, that's Lovecraft all over, isn't it? That's what happened, isn't it, with his fiction? I mean, he was not successful, was he, when he was alive?
No.
Sadly.
He was successful enough to be anthologized.
Yes.
And so people who were interested in this kind of fiction would come across Lovecraft stories, wouldn't they? And then they would go from there. Yeah. And it's it is a kind of a viral, it is spreading. It's it just takes a while.
Yeah,
But it
it's
gets
very
in
slow.
particularly
Yeah,
via its influence on cinema.
yeah, that's it, isn't it? It's when it captures in like the popular imagination, when there's something a bit more mainstream
Mm,
that runs with it. I mean, I think Thing really in more recent
very
years
much so.
that is
Yes.
very much, and of course Alien too. I mean, Alien is
Alien.
also a very Lovecraftian story.
Yes.
Although that includes all of the stuff that Lovecraft would find very icky indeed. He would
Yeah.
not go anywhere near, so the gender politics or anything like, not consciously anyway.
No, but I mean, Giger is how that ends up in there.
Yeah, of
And
course.
Giger is an example of exactly that. He's one of those creators who was
Highly
steeped in,
influenced. I mean,
yeah,
massively steeped. I mean, his one of his most famous collections is called the Necronomicon,
exactly. Yes.
and it's
Yes.
it's very fleshy and very uterinal and very sexual in nature.
The other thing that this strikes me as a huge influence on is the whole trend, which again, it starts to pick up speed really and become a cultural force of some kind in the late 60s or 70s, is what you could call von Danikenism. That sort of pop theory that human culture has been influenced by alien civilizations,
Yes, of
alien beings,
course, the ancient alien nonsense. Of
the
course, I
ancient
mean,
aliens.
this
Yeah.
is, I mean, this is kind of that crystallized, isn't it? It's turned into a whole mythology.
Yeah. And I was surprised on this reread how quiet it is about the implication that basically human beings are another creation
Yeah,
of the
it's
elder
odd,
things.
isn't it?
It
I mean,
is in there,
it's
but it's not
throwaway though, isn't
belabored.
it? No, it's
It's
kind of
Dyer
throwaway.
treats it, yeah, Dyer
It's like,
treats it as
yeah,
almost like this throwaway detail.
and yet it's so resonant. It's so huge. I mean, it's simultaneously very interesting in its framing, and also one of the flaws of the story. Because really, in any real terms, or he needs to stop there, doesn't he? He needs to have his characters reacting to this revelation because it's epoch making. It's like
Well, it's even,
it's a revelation that alters everything, that changes everything, that reorganizes like our entire assumption of who we are as a species.
yes, yes, but
But his character's
it's
just sort of like, whatever, we've got exploring to do.
we get an apparent explanation for the creation of humankind
Hmm.
in Dyer's disquisition about the frieze. You know,
Hmm.
his improvised interpretation of the
Yes.
frieze, where he talks about the elder things creating these little mammals that they
Uh-huh.
treat as like amusing buffoons. So
Yes.
we get this ultra pessimistic misanthropic idea that the
Hmm.
human race is just essentially just monkeys
Yeah.
dancing for the organ grinder.
That's it. We're
Um,
we're not even like on the level of the Shoggoths, are we? We don't have the capability to like create the civilization or to function. We're just
well,
muck.
that's. I mean, again, we're not obliged to accept Dyer's interpretation.
Hmm.
There is another possibility, which seems to me to be quite clear, given that the emphasis on the idea that the Shoggoths are shapeshifters, which is
Ah,
that the Shoggoths are, some of them anyway, became human beings. That the
yeah.
human beings are actually just Shoggoths settled in this
In
form,
in
and
this
we don't know
state.
it.
Or that
Yes.
somehow, like maybe Shoggoths are into bread. If a
Or into
Shoggoth
bread.
becomes
Yes, that
human,
that would be very Lovecraftian, wouldn't it? The idea that
yeah,
humanity are like what happened when the Shoggoths bred with the mammals that the Elder
yes.
Things created, or something like that.
That would be
Yes.
very, very Lovecraft, wouldn't it? Because he's got this whole thing about, that awful term miscegenation, doesn't he? He's got this whole
Mm.
bugbear in his head about that. Yeah, that would make sense. There could even be like Shoggoths out there in human form and not, you wouldn't know, right?
Well, it opens up the idea that there's something you could do or say potentially that would cause human beings, either some or maybe every single
Mm,
human being on the planet, to suddenly sort of trigger their
yeah,
inner Shoggoth nature and kind of
yeah.
just suddenly explode into this great mass of black protoplasm.
And again, there are stories that are played with that very concept. I mean, it's largely aesthetic, but if you look at things like the Resident Evil games, for example, they have stuff like that kind of happening. It's usually triggered by a virus or something to that effect, but what's created is essentially a Shoggoth.
But it does complicate any sort of overly simplistic racial reading of the Shoggoths, doesn't it?
I think so. I think it does. Yeah. It just makes him more interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it kind of, if we are the Shoggoths, that kind of emphasizes the idea that the degradation of any civilization or any culture is just inherent in those who build it.
Yeah.
Not only do they create the products that destroy that civilization, and you have to remember also that this was written in, I think, 1930 or 1931. That is the absolute height of the Great Depression.
Yes,
so you can give this an economistic reading if you want to concentrate on the idea of the things societies make and how those things destroy those societies, mindlessly rebelling against those societies. You can look upon the Shoggoths as a representation of money, or of economic value itself,
of economy, of the notion of economy, like made manifest. That would make. I mean, that does make sense. It is. I mean, the Great Depression, I suppose, is almost like a microcosm of the greater entropy that he's talking about here, which is that systems inevitably decay. They inevitably fail. It doesn't matter what they are. They're prone to it. It's their nature to decay and to fail.
Because of what they do as well, because of what they make, because of their own activity.
Yeah.
It's not some outside force that destroys them and always comes along and destroys them. Because another emphasis in this story is that the Elder Things have fought countless outside forces.
Yes, there's the war with the children of Cthulhu, isn't there, at one point?
Yes.
They have a war over the earth with the children of Cthulhu and reach an impasse with them, I do believe. They reach some sort of weird peace with them.
Yeah, they kind of fight each other to a stalemate. Yeah. And separate and agree to stay away from each other. But it's not that brings down the Elder Things. It's the Elder Things' own creatures. It's their own production that brings them down.
Yeah, it's
so
not
there's
war. It's not war. Is almost treated as though it's inevitable. It's just part of civilization. It's just what happens.
Well, war is quite explicitly sort of competition over imperial territory. Really.
Yeah. That's exactly it. It's two invading races, isn't it? Two invading races.
Whereas what brings down a society is I mean, if you want to do a Marxist reading of this, it's the society's own internal contradictions.
Yes,
and its own internal contradictions are, I mean, Lovecraft makes the Shoggoths into simultaneously the working class and the money.
Yeah.
Doesn't he?
Yeah.
So
innately contradictory, yeah?
Yeah. Capitalist civilization is doomed by the fact that it relies upon human labor. And that human labor is inherently going to rebel against it and also fail to sustain it.
Yeah. Wow. Like I said, there are depths to this. There are things to talk about. My stumbling block is the visceral. It's the enjoyment of it.
It's just not fun to read for long stretches.
It's not. It's interesting. It's fascinating. Parts of it are very engaging. But
there are some lines in it which he means entirely sincerely, which do make one laugh. There's a line about Danforth's acute young nostrils or something like that.
It's to me the things that make me laugh are the bits where the characters say, "I will be brief." Or something to that. And then they go on to be very not brief indeed. Yeah,
and then to me, there's just something inherently comedic about penguins as well. So the minute you have penguins walking around, I can't take it seriously.
I know he describes them in slightly monstrous terms. They're big and they're blind and they're really weird, but it is silly.
It's a penguin.
It's a penguin. and doesn't Dyer follow them at one point? It's really odd. He sort of
Yeah,
uses them as almost like a guide through the tunnels.
and when the Shoggoth erupts from the tunnel, it's described as rolling over the penguins. And I'm sorry,
Over them,
that's just a
yeah,
funny image. Just
yeah,
this sort of gigantic globular monster erupts from a tunnel and just rolls
rolls
over and
over them.
flattens a load of penguins. It's just funny. I can't help
It
laughing at
is
that.
funny. It is. I don't know. The penguins are a really odd note, and I know he's probably trying to reference Arthur Gordon him in a very, very peculiar way, but yeah, they're a strange addition for me.
There is another thing, which is that there's implied to be a horror even beyond the Shoggoths, isn't there?
Hmm.
I mean, and that's a very Lovecraft thing to do. He's
That's
always
very, yeah, because
he's
he's always
always
going
yes
deeper,
anding
isn't he? Yeah,
himself.
that's it, isn't it? It's always deeper, deeper, deeper. There's something beyond what you can see or what's immediate. If there's an immediate threat, there's something worse. There's something deeper. There's something more mysterious going on. And I think
Yes.
that part of what makes this story so significant, I think, is its resonance. I mean, despite the wordiness of it and the verbosity, there is this sense of things between the gaps, isn't there? There's more. I mean, first of all, just the sheer scale of the Elder Things realm under the Antarctic. There must be other things down there. There must be stuff like that they've experimented on or created that have survived. By maybe even like byproducts of the Shoggoths, or the early eugenics experiments, or even other versions of the Elder Things themselves. There could be anything down there.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I, we talked about this a little bit when we talked about the mound,
Hmm.
and he's doing something similar in the mound. You get this description of of an alien culture,
Hmm.
which is relayed to us. And in the mound, I believe it's based on reading somebody's journals, isn't it? Somebody
That's right.
who was actually there, living with and it's very influenced by the coming race, Bulwer Lytton's The Coming Race.
Yeah.
He's I think I said when we talked about the mound that it works better than this.
Hmm.
I think I'd have to, in retrospect, I'd have to nuance that a bit because
Yeah.
I think they are doing more different than I thought they were doing. The
Mm.
mound is very much a an exercise in sort of talking about a fictional civilization with a fictional history,
Yeah.
and I think it kind of just in textual terms, I think the way it contextualizes that is probably better done in the sense of
Hmm.
being more plausible because what you have there is somebody relaying in summary the actual sort of written report of another person who was living in that
Yeah, yeah.
civilization,
So it's slightly
which
more immediate, isn't it? You get like first-hand impressions of what's of the civilization itself.
yeah, and in literal terms, it just feels more plausible than there's a there's a there's a freeze here which I'm going to interpret for
Yes,
you.
yes.
But at
I
the
think that's it, isn't it? It's that vehicle that is very, very hard to get over.
yes,
That
but at
device
the same
is
time,
you know.
I think there is something really interesting to me about the centerpiece of the story
Mhm.
being essentially and explicitly somebody's interpretation of a work of art. There is
Mm,
something very
mm.
interesting to me that Dyer. I mean, he's completely po-faced. He's just telling you this is what happened, and
Yep.
I've deduced it from this frieze. What are you laughing at?
Yeah,
That's his attitude.
it's absolute, isn't it, as well? There's no like space for interpretation here. This is what the frieze says. This is what
Yes,
this piece of art means.
yes. And I don't know how conscious Lovecraft was of doing this or not, but
Mm,
he's opening up all sorts of questions there
yeah.
about the nature of the reliability of the narrator.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. So, I mean, and he goes into very explicit and incredible detail about the history of the Elder Things and their civilization and their flights across space and their various colonizations. Um, you have to wonder, don't you? It leaves you wondering, just like how much of this is a little bit of ice madness, or because he is in dire strait. I mean, not to make a, you know, I'm doing a pun. He is in dire straits at that point, isn't he? He's been frightened, he's been traumatized, he's lost a lot of his people. Um, his state of mind can't be that stable.
Well, yeah, I mean, just without all that, he is trying to tell us that he's deduced the facts of the history of a civilization from a set of pictures,
Yes.
essentially. Well, okay,
Mhm.
again, I don't know how conscious Lovecraft is of opening up this. I suspect not very. I
Yeah.
suspect Dyer's straightforward, serious-faced, totally literal minded approach is kind of a mirror of Lovecraft's. I think
Yeah.
this is what he's conscious of. I've imagined this society having this history. I
Yep.
want the reader to know about it.
Hmm.
How do I get them that information? I get them that information via my narrator reading it on a frieze. I think
Yeah.
that's what's going on in Lovecraft's mind, right? But whether he knows it or not, what he's doing is he's opening up this possibility for us to wonder, well, are we hearing about what actually happened to this civilization
Hmm.
as deduced by Dyer from a frieze? Or are we hearing about what Dyer thinks about things?
Right.
Because how much of this is his, and again, we've talked about how very directly Dyer feels like just Lovecraft talking to us. How
Hmm.
much of this is just how much of this is Dyer's own take on history
Yes.
and society and civilization,
Hmm.
his own world, essentially?
Yeah.
Are
Yeah.
we actually getting something? Are we actually getting a snapshot of something that quote unquote happened within the literal real world within the frame of this story,
Uh-huh.
or are we getting a snapshot of the inside of the mind of somebody, whose mentality, whose politics, whose view of history and the human race is being confessed to us inadvertently
Yeah. Now that
via
is
his
interesting.
interpretation?
I'd like that, because that does give you, I mean, that does give you some notion of who he is as a person, which is something you don't get when you take the story in purely superficial terms.
Yeah,
It gives you
I
some
mean,
idea of who he is as a person, as a
it
human being.
it's the danger inherent in all criticism, which is that you project. It's the old thing about when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Right.
If you have a particular set of ideas and you're trying to interpret anything really, but
Hmm.
particularly if you're trying to interpret literary texts or works of art,
Right.
you do have to try to be careful not to make the mistake of thinking that your reaction to it is
Is
just
absolute or
it.
correct, or yeah,
Yes.
that it's the only
You
thing that can be true.
yes. Yeah. You always have to bear in mind it's fine to have an interpretation of a work of art based on your critical perspective, your
Yeah,
politics, whatever,
because
but
that's
you
the
have to
nature of the
remember that that's
process,
what
right?
you're doing.
Hmm.
I mean, I've just been trying to make that distinction myself. I've just been trying to remember the difference between the text and the mentality of the man who wrote it as he was writing it.
Yeah,
You
right.
do have to do that. Otherwise, your interpretation of everything just becomes you projecting your own ideas onto it.
Hmm. Hmm. So the
Um,
device makes the whole story suspect in many respects, doesn't it? And
completely.
I
Yeah.
kind of like that. That does give it an extra layer, doesn't it? It gives it an extra, and also, I mean, given the that resonates with the title, doesn't it, as well? Like the Mountains of Madness,
Yes.
I mean, that
The, the,
the madness is obviously very polysemic. There's lots of different types of madness going on here, lots of interpretations of what that means. But it can certainly be applied to Dyer himself.
absolutely. Yeah. But Lovecraft has this habit. He does this with several things of disavowing things that he then does. I mean, Lovecraft is an avowed enemy of Freudian psychoanalysis.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
He writes stories that are all about the secret meaning of dreams.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Lovecraft hates modernism. He
Hmm.
consciously hates. I think, even in this, he talks about futurism,
Yep.
doesn't he? Some of these stories are incredibly modernistic in their construction. Call of Cthulhu is a great example.
Yeah, yeah.
Its construction as a literary text is made sort of fragments of other texts
Uh-huh.
stuck together with varying degrees of reliability.
Yeah,
That's modernism.
it really
That's
is.
literary modernism.
I do love it. I love the fact that these stories contain criticisms of those elements, but they are also emblematic of them. They're products of them.
Mm.
Kind of brilliant. I kind of love it. And of course, Lovecraft wouldn't have been. He's not really conscious of this, is he?
No, he's kind of anti-conscious of it.
Yeah.
He's consciously against it
He's quite
while he's
earnest,
doing
isn't
it.
he? He's quite earnest. As you say, this is what he wants. This is the device. This is the vehicle for what he wants the reader to take from the
Yeah.
story. And again, it's something that's it's oddly aggressive for all its passivity. It's oddly aggressive, isn't it? Because he is trying to leave you no wiggle room whatsoever. This is what you are going to take. This is what you are going to feel. This is what you are going to interpret from this story.
Well, I think part of the problem with it as a read is these long stretches where it's just trying to present itself as the scientific report of a very
Yes.
sciencey scientist.
Yes.
So you get lots of stuff about trilobites and things that, you know. So what that's there for, I feel like, is this sort of over elaborated kind of desperate attempt to establish Dyer's objectivity,
Yes.
isn't it?
And legitimacy, right? It's trying to
And
give you his
legitimacy as a rational observer. What
right.
Dyer does is that he looks at things and he tells you what they are scientifically and rationally. That's Dyer. That's the character as he goes to elaborate lengths to try to establish that idea in your mind in order to lead you to the point where Dyer is reporting to you the meaning of a frieze. It's almost like he's desperate to try to convince you in advance that Dyer's interpretation of the frieze is correct.
Yes, it's unassailable, right? It's unassailable. He's the authority. As you say, he's the author, right? So you must take him seriously. You must take him seriously. There can be no other way.
And the author is a scientist, and he's a practitioner of the hard sciences. So when he tells you what a frieze means, you can be sure that he's right. Well, no, you can't, because it's a work of art.
Just by
you
the very
can't
nature
analyze. Yeah, you can't give an objective, logical, rational, hard science summary of a work of art in the same way that you can with the fossil of a trilobite.
Right. And
So,
like you say, he chose to write
and
it
that
this
insistence, yes, exactly. It's that over insistence that makes it seem all the more doubtful, isn't it? Because when somebody's saying, "No, this is definitely true," honestly, you doubt it. You can't help doubting it.
Right, of course you do. It's that whole thing, isn't it? It's like, when someone is shrieking about their masculinity or whatever, and you're like, yeah,
Yes.
there's nothing gayer, man. So pack it in. Yeah, it's absolutely. It's the lady doth protesting too much, isn't it?
That's it. Yeah, yeah. So there's kind of a radical subjectivity, a completely unwilling, unconscious radical subjectivity at the heart of this.
There are so many ways he could have done it as well that would have been much more absolute.
Yes.
That would have been way more absolute, given the existence of things like fossils and physical specimens and chemical specimens. This is a specialized scientific survey with loads of specialists. He could have done it in so many different ways, but he chose to present a work of art and symbolism.
He chose to do it this way. Yes. It reminds me of the Sherlock Holmes story, The Final Problem, which is the one where Sherlock Holmes ostensibly dies on the Reichenbach Falls.
Yeah.
And Conan Doyle, I believe, always maintained, and I think he probably believed this, that he was deliberately, consciously, definitely, honestly, really trying to kill off Holmes. And yet, if you look at the structure of that story, it is so weirdly put together. Watson never meets Moriarty. He never sees Moriarty except fleetingly. Holmes points to a man hanging out of a train window and says, "There he is."
Yeah.
And Holmes dies off screen, so to speak. Watson, the narrator, doesn't see it happen. He leaves Holmes and he comes back and he finds a note and Holmes is gone. It's written to leave open the possibility of Holmes's survival. It's
Yeah.
written to leave open the possibility that the whole thing is just Holmes having Watson on, which is actually an idea which is explored in subsequent elaborations by other people
Yeah.
on the story. So Conan Doyle unconsciously wrote that in such a way that the narrator, Watson, believes Holmes is dead, but we have no particular reason to be sure about that.
Yeah.
Neither does he. So that, he can eventually do what he did do, which is bring Holmes back. And yet, I don't think Conan Doyle was conscious that he was doing that.
No, not at all. I mean, if you read his writings on the matter, he's quite vicious, isn't he? It's like, no, I intended to kill him. I wanted to kill him.
Yeah, but
he
for some
claims
reason
it was fan pressure, doesn't he? He claims it was fan pressure that brought him back.
Well, he was sick. He was sick of writing it, and he wanted to write serious historical novels. So he wanted to be free of Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
And after a few years' time, I think his historical novels had failed to take off. People didn't like them very much, and he remembered how nice the checks had been from the Strand magazine. But at the time, he is definitely trying to kill Holmes definitively, and yet he writes the story so that you don't see Holmes die.
Yeah.
Why did he do that?
Of course, if he wanted it,
he could have written it any way he wanted.
Absolutely, yeah. And just as here, right?
Yeah.
Why did he choose that device? Unless he wanted it to be left on some level, he wanted it to be left open to interpretation.
Yeah. And similarly with this, Lovecraft chooses to write this story in such a way that the central thesis of the text essentially is presented to us in a way that is sort of radically open to doubting. It's presented literally as somebody's interpretation of something abstract.
Yeah. And ostensibly, as we said before, someone who is in a very strange state of mind at that point. So completely unreliable in any real terms.
Yeah. It's almost like Lovecraft is building doubt about his own worldview into his own account of his own worldview.
Yeah, and maybe subconsciously, not intentionally.
Yeah, I'm sure not intentionally.
I'm almost certain. Yeah, almost certain about the fact, because he's so po-faced in this. He's so earnest, isn't he, about what he wants you to feel, what he wants you to experience as a result of this story.
Yes, this is almost a work of it's almost a work of philosophy. It's almost like one of those 18th century philosophical novels, where it has the structure of a novel in that it has characters and scenes and things, but it's actually a work of philosophy.
Yes, yeah. It's almost like the story parts are vehicles for the ideas, aren't they? And it's very thin in that regard. It's very thin indeed.
The most famous writer of those today is Sade, is the Marquis de Sade. Sade's novels are essentially philosophical treatises dressed up with the trappings of novels.
Yes,
because there's huge stretches where the characters just sit around talking about this sort of extreme libertarian in radical sort of libertarian philosophy that Sade had. And that was very common. That was a recognized common genre at the time. Mountains of Madness is almost like that. It's almost like Lovecraft's writing his great sort of philosophical thesis on
his thesis,
civilization itself. Yeah.
It's almost like a manifesto, yeah?
Yes, yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's fascinating that it's such a nihilistic one too. As
I say,
it's a confessional element to it. This is the great aching existential abyss at the heart of Lovecraft, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so nihilistic and so pessimistic that you can't even really call it reactionary in any sort of coherent ideological sense.
To be reactionary, it would have to have a vision, wouldn't it? It would have to have like an idea of how to build, of how to put these things into action. But he's so nihilistic, he doesn't see any point in that, because it's all going to crumble anyway.
Well, reactionaries are Arcadians. They're the ones who say, well, we stop this new thing and we turn this bit of progress back and we get rid of this, that, and the other. We'll go back to the way things used to be when it was good. Well, that's not this.
That's definitely not this.
There was no time when it was good, and there will be no time when it is good. That's the thesis of this.
Yeah,
nothing works.
No, nothing. And nothing has ever worked or ever will.
Yeah, not for long
It's
anyway.
yeah. I mean, that's very interesting in context with all of the scientific stuff, isn't it? Because it is like he's saying it doesn't matter. It's all ephemera. It's meaningless. It doesn't matter what you know or what new contexts or discoveries you have or what
Yeah,
specializations you might have. It's meaningless in the
it's
face
all
of
just
this.
everything is destined to just be fossil record. That's
Yeah,
every living thing, everything you do or make or create will one day just be fossil record,
yeah.
except that amorphous thing that is just destruction.
That is just
That sort of
chaos.
innate spirit of destruction, the thing that
Yeah,
always destroys. That's the only thing that lives.
yeah.
And it
That's
keeps
almost
coming
like
back and destroying everything.
yeah, that's the absolute, isn't it, in this story? That's the only absolute thing, the only enduring thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Shoggoth is the ultimate winner
Yeah,
because it is destruction.
it's
It
enduring.
is
Yeah,
this it is it's the self-destruct button in reality
and
that
oddly,
reality can't help pressing over and over
yeah,
again.
and oddly in that regard, it's truth, isn't it? Within the
Yes,
assumptions of this story, the Shoggoth is truth.
absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Wow, 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 wow. Well, bloody hell, Jack. I mean, I was a bit worried to be honest, because like having read it, I was like, oh god, are we going to get anything out of this other than moaning about it? Other than saying, is it? It's not very good, is it? But no, it's like Red Hook, isn't
Well,
it? I'm kind of glad that we had time to digest it.
we could
Um,
just be a pair of madmen staring at a frieze
we,
and, imagining things about it.
we
So,
could, yes. Ironically, we are kind of doing what Dyer is doing in the story in many respects, but hey.
yeah.
Um, wow, yeah, that was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. It was interesting to revisit. Probably won't ever again with that one.
No, I can't see myself rushing
I
back to
might
it.
I might
Um,
skip it next time I do a read through of Lovecraft. Before we
I
go,
feel
is there
like
anything?
you could probably create a really nice. I mean, oh God, heresy. ST Joshi won't like me. I
Oh,
feel like you could probably do a really good sort of edited down version of this. If you
mm,
created a framing device where, Dyer's plane crashed on the way back, and
hmm
then you said this manuscript was recovered from the crashed aircraft, and large sections of it were burnt, but I present you with
mm,
what survives. You could cut out all the stuff about fucking trilobites,
yeah.
and yeah, you could probably cut this down to something a lot more readable.
Well, digestible. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Cut out maybe the big sagging bit in the middle.
yeah, yeah,
That might help. That might help a little bit. Or just find another way of communicating that stuff.
yeah,
You know.
maybe.
But yes, is if before we go, is there anything you'd like to throw out into the ether?
Oh well, I blog at Eruditorium Press. I have a Patreon. I have a Patreon, which I just said literally a second ago. I think I'm a bit tired. Um, Advance access for a mere dollar to everything that I do. I do podcasts, including podcasts that aren't publicly released, and you'd get that you get those. You'd also get advance access to things like this. For
hmm
instance, you might even be listening to this on my Patreon in advance of its
Very well,
publication at
man.
George's channel. You might be. It's not impossible. I have my own YouTube channel where I release audiobooks and Blue Sky at Times
hmm
Carcass,
When
and
it's working,
when it's working,
when
yeah,
it's
when it's
bloody
not been
working.
hacked by Iran,
hmm
which is ironic because I think most people on Blue Sky are probably on their side.
Probably
Um,
yes, given the nature of
and
Blue Sky's demographics, yes.
and I don't speak German, the podcast where we talk about the far right. And that's me.
Excellent. Links all below, by the way, guys. Links below. Same as usual for myself. I'm here on Exaggerated Elegy, currently doing lots of. You know why I was ill last week, Jack? I did 5 podcasts last week, and I kind of
So it was a
overstretched.
slow week then.
Yeah, yeah, very slow week. I kind of overstretched myself and started to feel very, very ill at one point.
Oh,
I
I
was
see.
fine,
You
fine. Yeah.
mean you were ill because you'd done
I
5
think
podcasts?
so. I think
I
so. Yeah.
see. I see.
I think it probably was that on top of like lots of other stuff as well. But it was
podcast sickness.
It was yeah, right. It was a bit much, a little bit much.
Yeah, slow down a bit.
Yeah, clearly need to slow down the output. Lots of video game Let's Plays going on. You can find links to all of my published work over at strangeplaygrounds.com and over at Amazon, Evil Empire. Type in George Daniel Lee. You'll find all of my short story collections. My non-fiction you'll find at Ginger Nuts of Horror. The My Life in Horror series, a couple of articles coming out there very, very soon. Can't remember on what at the moment. And I think that's it for me right now. Oh, you can find me on Bluesky too at Exaggerated Elegy or George Daniel Lee. Yeah, Jack, that was fab. What would you like to do next? What with regards to the Lovecraft retrospectives? Which story would you like to do?
Ooh, I don't know. It's yeah, I don't know. It's getting a bit tricky to choose, isn't it? What else do I like? I like you've done Color Out of Space, haven't you?
We've done Color Out of Space
on the retrospective.
Although we could, I mean, we could talk about it.
Well, I like that one. So,
I like Color Out of Space. I'm well up for that. Well, we could also, talk about the film version while we're at it.
Oh yeah, we're going to do the film in the series with
of
Rob,
course,
aren't we?
We're going to do it with for Not the Same Log. So
well, we should fold a discussion of the story into that then. I think
absolutely, I think that's a good idea.
Well, what else have we got? There's Rats in the Walls. That's fun. Shunned House. Dreams in the Witch House.
I'd love to do the Shunned House. I like
Shunned
that
House.
One. Yeah, I'd love to do that one.
Okay, that's settled then.
There's a very, very, very good horror babble of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will actually, guys. I will also put links to Horror Babble because every time I do one of these retrospectives, I read the story, then I go and listen to the Horror Babble version because I love it. I love the Horror Babble stuff. I think he's great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, I like that.
Until next time. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Take care, Lily.